Welcome to Audio Podcast. You have officially joined the resistance. Today I'm here with Mpilo Nkambule. Tricky last name. I'm working on it. All right. So I want to turn it over to you. I want to tell a little bit about yourself. We did a live group cast not too long ago. Some of the viewers may have caught you on that, but for those who haven't, just tell a little bit about yourself, who you are, what you're doing, and we'll go from there.
Thank you, Eric, for having me in your platform. I am happy to be here. I still remember that great energy that we had when we had our group launch, and it was a great moment. Well, I am an African. I'm living in the US now. I've been here for about 15, 14 months or 15 months. I was born in a very small country called Swaziland, now is called Eswatini. It's landlocked by South Africa and Mozambique. So it's on the eastern side of Mozambique. It's the last absolute monarchy, as people will analyze or will talk about it in the politics. Um, I grew up there, went to school there, even my college education I did there. I did law for college education, and I was admitted to practice as a lawyer in Swaziland. But after practicing for about 6 years, I came to the US of A and joined another institution here in Salt Lake. Not Salt Lake, here in Utah, it's in Provo. It's called Brigham Young University, J. Reuben Clark Law School. That's where I did my master's degree in the law. So I came, not April, I should say August 2019, and it was for a year up until April, which is a couple of months ago. That's when I graduated. Now I am working with one esteemed law firm here in Salt Lake City, downtown, called Kerry McConkie Attorneys. And that's what I'm doing every day, going into the office, practice corporate law, reviewing contracts. One of the fascinating things that I'm doing of late, which is something that I did not do before coming to the US in this firm, is what is called data privacy. So it's one of those hot things out there in legal practice globally. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, things have definitely changed in terms of data privacy. There's been a lot of new legal developments on that as well, especially like email communications, data retention. So yeah, you're gonna have your hands full with that.
Oh yeah, it's a lot. It's a crazy world. We've got the GDPR in Europe,
Yep.
and it's just rocking the entire world, because you find yourself dealing with data, or companies find themselves dealing with data of European or citizens of the union. And then we've got one crazy one in California, the CCP. I don't know if the CCPA. I don't know if you heard about that one, and it's just making people sweat because they don't know how to comply and how to make sure that they are safe and they're not caught up in the middle of legal battles.
Yeah. I don't know them all by name, but I know like California always has its own regulations, and then UK, and it's just, you think you're just dealing in the US, but the way we deal online with everything, you kind of have to figure out how to follow everybody's rules. So I can imagine that would be challenging. Well, that's great to hear what you're doing. Things are on track in that regard. And you mentioned, our last conversation, and I wish we would have had another 2 hours, when we were, we got into a groove there. I mean, you were quoting Emerson and just all kinds of stuff. Um, you have an amazing recall ability with these quotes. So I'm gonna make the safe bet. You read a lot, or you at least listen to quite a few audiobooks in order to have this stuff just kind of off the top of your head. So
Oh, oh yeah.
who are some of your main, well, first question is what what do you spend more time on? Audiobooks or actual reading?
I will say both. Uh, I've got a history of reading a lot,
Okay.
and I've read a lot of books in my life, and I feel like I don't remember a lot most of the time. I feel like, oh man, look at this, so many books on my library. I have a library in Africa, and now I've started collecting books since I've been in the US. I think I've collected about 50 books already, trying to read. It's difficult to do this private reading while you have the law and you have to study, read, write. So I do. I've been doing a lot of reading for a number of years. I would say 15, 20 years. One of the fascinating things, it's the mind and the heart. I've tried to study. I'm still looking for more books that talk about these two operating systems of the human being. I think if you understand the mind and the laws of thought, you are home and dry. You'll be able to fare well in this life, because it's all about, the mind. Even those who want to attack us today, who want to destroy us, they go and try and target the mind. So I do a lot of reading, but I must say also that I listen to audiobooks, but I haven't listened to them a lot since I've been here, to be quite honest, because I've been I've been very busy at school. You hit the ground running and you have a lot to read. It's very stressful moments, and here I have to wake up in the morning. Try I avoid doing any other activity in the morning except trying to meditate and then listen to some, for some few minutes, to something spiritual, some of the spiritual teachers, and ancient thinkers such as Marcus Aureli. In his meditation, probably might have heard of him, the great Roman emperor, and
Yep.
and other folks like James Allen, and who I think is one of my favorite writers of the past 100 years.
I think that's a good practice because I'm guilty of doing the opposite. Like I want to know everything. Not really, but I love learning new things. So I'll have like, you know, 30 videos queued up that I just, I keep it running, and then I'll realize I might be getting a little wound up, and it's like, hey, did you take 30 minutes to yourself today of silence, peace and quiet, have a little meditation, and, you know, so I'm guilty of the opposite. So I definitely think that's a good habit. So who are some of your go-to? You mentioned James Allen. You mentioned, what was the other one?
Yeah, I think he's a former Roman emperor in
Marcus
ancient Rome.
Aurelius.
Yeah, Marcus Aurelius.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I know he was like heavy into stoicism,
Oh
things like
yeah,
that. Yeah.
yeah.
So
You
who
are
are some of
right.
who's your top five go to reads?
Mm, I would say I will begin with James Allen,
Okay.
the Victorian writer. He wrote a book entitled "As a Man Thinketh in His
Yep.
Heart." Great volume, and I've read a number of his books. Out from the Heart, The Master of Destiny. I'm trying to remember the others because he writes about 1903 until 1912, if I remember very well. And he wrote a lot of books within that short space of time.
He was
I
putting up
couldn't believe
shots.
myself.
Oh man.
I think he wrote over 10 books. And it seems like he was so much dedicated. And when you read his works, you think, I think he had more time to research the ancient traditions, Eastern philosophy, Buddhism, Confucianism, Hinduism, Christianity, and so forth, because he was just so highly spiritual and highly, conscious and knowledgeable. you know, people who were like him in his time, because he was just a newspaper editor, what we call a journalist today. Those people were not important in the 1800s or early 1900s in England. You know, the important thing was the king or the queen and the other people like the knights and so forth. You know, they ranked
Yeah.
people in a certain way. So if you were in journalism, you were nobody. But just like any other, but just
Yeah.
like any other, just like any other great man, 100 years later, the person surfaces with his writing and you realize, wow. But another one, I would say, the second one is Thomas Troward. I don't know if you've ever heard of him. He was English, descended into India in the 1800s, or it might have been late 1800s, if I remember very well. Yeah, and he became a divisional judge there in Punjab. He has written a number of books. The creative, what's this title? I'm forgetting. But let me start with the one that I remember: Edinburgh Lectures on Mental Science. Beautiful work. I think that would be my number two. He also writes a very, very short volume, The Spirit of Opulence. I think it's not more than 5 pages, where he speaks about opulence and all that. And then another one, is it the creative force in the individual? I think that's what the title of the other book that I've read. Really, really deep stuff. I'm somebody who loves deep stuff, just like you, as you have said.
Yeah.
I love learning new things. Bring me sometimes it's painful to learn new things. Well, let me
Yeah.
think about a third one. One of the persons that has really touched my life was Stephen R. Covey. I'm sure you know him, the writer of 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. When I was in Swaziland, I had a friend coming in, an American, and then he came back to America. We were connected, and he learned about that. I love reading Stephen R. Covey, speaking about him. So he said, "Oh well, I know Stephen R. Covey. My friend lives in Provo." So he said, "I occasionally meet him." So he connected me with him, and they collected all his writings, books, sent them to Africa to me, and spoiled me. So,
Oh, wow. That's
so,
great. You need to
so
schedule an interview with him.
oh, he died in 2012.
Oh, man. Oh, well.
Yeah, Stephen
No,
Alcobo was one of the great writers in the
if
US and
only.
yeah, the entire world. I think a lot of people know him in the business sector because one of
God,
those.
that's bizarre because I just got that book on Audible. I haven't even finished it yet. I got it like 6 months ago, probably on
Mm,
Audible. So I had
oh
no
yeah,
clue. Yeah,
oh
I had
yeah.
no
He
clue.
not only his writings, the writings of his sons, because he has got a son that is almost doing the same thing after him, because he was a president of Franklin Covey, that is his son. He became the president and later on started his own something similar. He has written a
Okay.
book. It's called The Speed of Trust. His name is Stephen M.R. Covey. So the only difference is the M.R. in between. So it's
Okay.
kind of like the monarchical way of doing things.
Yeah.
There's the Stephen R. Covey Jr. or something like that. Yeah,
Right.
so that's the third one. The fourth one, let me see. There are so many. I think I've been excited and thrilled in learning about the ancient Egyptian thought. It's called Hermetic Teachings.
Oh
It's
yeah.
found in a volume. I think the volume is about 100 and something pages, called the Kabbalion. So
Yes.
I
Yep.
occasionally visit that.
I have it sitting right over there on the shelf.
Oh
Um,
boy,
so I got the Kabbalion by the Three Initiates. It's written anonymously. Yeah. It's all
yeah.
the Hermetic teachings, or
Oh,
it's really a
oh,
summary of the Hermetic teachings. Yeah.
oh, yeah, yeah. I agree with you there. Oh, that's really rich, rich.
Yeah. That
If
one
you,
blew my mind. It's so simple, but when you read it, I had to read it through twice before I was like, everything in this book is correct. And I started thinking about things, and that really opened my perception. that's that's a must have. Yeah.
Oh, I agree with you on that one. I always go back there, and sometimes when I turn on the audio, and I'm like, boy, it seems like all the problems that we occasionally run through can be solved by understanding what the Kabbalion talks about: the law of gender, the law of polarity, you know,
Yep.
the law of rhythm, and all that. And I'm like, wow. Unfortunately, in our communities, we are not raised that way to,
Yeah.
learning it at the family level, at the school level. That's something obscure you have to find for yourself. And I think that should be part of our schools.
It definitely should. And I think we have to take our own medicine, so to speak. So we have to go through this, see that it doesn't work in order to come back to those foundational principles that actually built society over thousands of years. I think that really has to happen because you can't force it on someone. You can yell it, scream it all day. You can tell people to look at this, read this, but it's not until people hit a dead end that they choose to go in a different direction. So I think we're kind of getting to that. And I know you've got one more, but then I've got a question for you after number five. What's your number five?
I have to be current with number five.
Okay.
There is a brain coach called Jim Quick. I think you may know him. He has written a book, just one book. It's called Limitless. I don't know if I have it here. I should. Oh yeah.
That's another one I got on Audible, but I haven't tapped into it yet. So
Oh
that'll
yeah.
be I'll cue those up next.
The thing I like about it is that it's more practical. I have always been a very, very slow reader. And that thing frustrates me because I know that there is a lot in books, in these good books, wisdom literature. So reading at a snail pace frustrates me. So I try to get programs to just awaken my mind. And then, so here he speaks about memory, he speaks about speed reading, and all the like, and principles such as focus, which is I've read it in other books. So I will say that's my number five.
Nice. That's a good one. I think we have the same problem. I'm just slow at reading. I don't have an excuse. English is my first language, but I'm still slow. I read, but I, the way my mind is, as I read through, I want to break it down and understand it 100% before I go any further. And that's impossible to do when you're reading a book. You got to read it two, three, maybe even five times before you start soaking in the majority of it. So I've found my way around that is to, use audiobooks, use book summaries in some cases. I don't really like to, but I'll do audiobooks, and that way I can keep doing stuff without stopping, reading, breaking everything down. If I hear it, I can retain it. So that's my cheat code to get reading more books. It's just audio format. But we talked about some of the time and place of these writers, some of their occupations, and when I look back, I wonder, like, how much different of a world it must have been in. I feel like today we have so much nonsense attached to our day-to-day lives. Like, we're so focused and so ingrained in some of the industrial behavior patterns that I think we're probably operating at like 30% efficiency. I mean, tops, just commuting to work and doing things in the way in which we do them, spending time on the things that don't really matter to us. How much time do we spend on things that don't directly improve our life? I'm not even talking about TV, but just the maintenance of a suburban type of environment, a suburban type of life. I look back and, we talk about practicality. I think there was an element of sustainability incorporated in people's lives, like subsistence farming and and just common sense. Really, if you if you want to make a living, you have to work for it. You have to have your lifestyle integrated into that. But I look back and it's like, okay, to manage the grass, they probably had livestock, which yielded, you know, produce in the
Mm,
form of livestock. And they also had their garden. They had this, they had that going. Now you look today, everything costs us time and money. So it's either going to cost you time or money to maintain your lawn now. It's either going to cost you time or money to go buy your fruits and vegetables. You gotta constantly trade your time and your money just to stay where you're at, not even to move forward. So I don't know. When I look back and I see how much certain people achieved, sometimes in a very short period of time, I just wonder what would it look like today if the world was still operating with those principles in mind. Do you think, my question to you, do you think the lifestyle of that time, say, time of Marcus Aurelius, do you think that was a factor in him being able to actualize himself? Or do you think he just made it happen?
I think it's a combination of both because they had adversity.
Yeah.
Some of these Stoics, Seneca, Aurelius, who are the others? Oh well, uh, I forget them. You realize that though some of them had success, great success, becoming an emperor or becoming a right-hand man of an emperor, you find that some of them would be exiled from being high up there in high office. Sometimes you get exiled and you have to run away, or you have to you have to break your limbs somehow through certain adversities. So they made it happen because of the principles that they believed in. When you look at Stoicism, as opposed to another school of thought called the Epicureans, they believed that the highest good was virtue. So they were grounded on these principles. And I also like to think that, in our communities, I will just fold my fists like this and say, you will have the community behave in a certain way, and then you also have the moral laws of the universe. You find that the community is like this. And there will be also what is called the church. The church and the community were in this same level, and that is any whatsoever church may mean, spirituality, whatsoever organization or a religious belief or moral belief that you have, you'll find that the moral belief system and the community were kind of like at par. But in recent years, or in the highly industrialized world we live in today, the community is gone down, and the institutions, spiritual institutions, are left by themselves. There is not that connection or congruity amongst the two. So way back then, moral law was part and parcel of the community, the family, the individual. They were grounded in that. They don't have to go to a school and be taught or read a book to learn more about it. It was part and parcel of the community. So that's why I'm saying they had to make it happen, and also the circumstances were allowing. Somebody once observed that in order to get evil or be penetrated by some evil thing, in World War II, you needed to go out there and find it. Today we talk about immoral things, we talk about pornography, we talk about all these things that bombards us and make our heads crazy. Sometimes we don't realize the thing that we are exposed to. Sometimes we are exposed not realizing that we are exposed to something corrupting to the mind. So those people, they didn't have all that. So up
Yeah.
until World War II in the 1940s and so forth, the thinking was, you had to go out there and find evil, find all these negative things. But today, so thick and fast, these things are just right around us. I think it does affect us and send us crazy. For instance, social media, I think it's a great disturbance, though it is a great tool, because now we are
Yeah.
having all these applications. So there is always good and evil.
That's that back to the law of duality, from the
Exactly,
Hermetic teachings. And that's
100%.
I think that's a good point. Like they didn't have near the conveniences that we have today, but they also at the same time didn't have the same challenges. Like there's always been corruption. We have
Yeah,
corruption today. We had corruption then. People are getting killed. You may not get exiled, but there's cancel culture. Yeah,
mhm.
you can't. I mean, you could technically be imprisoned, and there's different forms of exile today. I think, but yeah, in some ways it's the same, just a
Yeah,
different time, and for those things that we've got greater conveniences and greater opportunities, those same challenges come along with those. So with
yeah.
that said, within every challenge is an opportunity. So it's important to understand those principles, I guess, and that kind of helps us navigate no matter what time or place we're in.
And I
But
believe, I believe that our time is more tougher, it's more difficult, and to survive in this time, I believe it requires a lot of strength. It requires a lot of character.
yeah,
Just look at the restoration. I believe that we live in an age where there's just a restoration of all things. The ancient teachers that seemingly went to sleep somehow in the subsequent centuries and generations, suddenly there is this bubbling, it's coming up. The East African ancient history, the West coming up, everything is coming together, and we are living in a digital deluge. There's all kinds of distraction like never before. So I believe they were able to accomplish much and show us so much character, but they were not faced with so much adversity, with so much challenges as we have. I believe we are more stronger than them because of what we have to go through and what we have to battle with. As a matter of fact, if you choose to be virtuous today, I have got great respect for such a person who choose principle over, fancifulness and all these ephemeral fancies. I have great respect for that person today because of what we get constantly bombarded with. Others, there are people out there who are intent in just making us slaves,
yeah.
because of information. And we've seen all this censoring that just shows that people are intent in having us going a certain direction, thinking certain things. But still, to have people who will still choose virtue over vice, I've got great respect for such.
And that's a really difficult thing to do in this time. Like you said, it's endless distractions. It takes a different level of mental fortitude to navigate in today's world. But I think in a way, all the challenges that people of the past went through, their teachings are still echoing forward into today. They're still holding true. Stoicism is still a very useful way. I think they had more physical threats. They were physically probably had the same level of bombardment that we have mentally. So it's kind
Mhm.
of just that shift. It's different eras, different struggles, but I think that's an interesting point. And it's in my opinion, it's each generation's responsibility to do their absolute best, because anything less than that, it's not going to be enough. You know, it's not. You're setting the stage for future generations, and that's why I think it's so important that we all tap into our higher selves, so to speak, that we all move in that direction of self-actualization, because everyone has something to contribute to the world. So
And
that
we have the
said,
tools. And we
what
have
is
the
your
tools to deal
yes,
with all
we
the
do
challenges
this.
we have.
There's no excuses. It's hard. It's not going to do it by itself, but we have everything we need. I mean, we really do. So, what is your gift to the world?
Wow, that's an interesting question. Maybe
I'll
I should
re
take it.
I'll rephrase it. I'll rephrase it. So, what do you think of day and night in terms of what you want to accomplish here while you're alive?
I believe that there is some greater power uh, that is interested in me, interested in all of humanity. We may call that power in various languages. We say God, we can call spirit, others, I believe that power is so much interested in each one of us, interested in me, and that power broadcasts its light to me, through me, and I have to give it to others. So I always feel like that I have to teach other people what I learn. Some years ago I came to the conclusion that my purpose is to share knowledge with other people. Hence, I jumped into the opportunity to do podcasting.
Yep.
Before I came to the US, I think 3 years before I came to the US, I used to be a guest writer for the Times of Swaziland. So
Okay.
every week I will write an article. It was more of self-development stuff and the philosophy and spirituality that I would write about, you know. So I felt like that was my way of contributing to life, since I have this passion for learning, this love for wisdom, and not only just mere loving and passion, but acting on it, gathering books. And, when you love something, you want to share with others. You want to share uh, your voice. You want to share. You want to share yourself with others in the best way that you can. So I was convinced some years ago that this is my area. This is how I can impact the world and reach out to a lot of people. And I've gone around in my neighborhood or in Swaziland, in the universities and sometimes some institutions, religious institutions where people are gathered in numbers, and gave motivational speeches. So that's what I thought my area is, as inspired by others who have gone before me, who are doing the same thing, those that I look up to. I don't know if I got the question right and
Yeah.
was on
No, you
point,
did.
the response.
So, I find that people who have been through the most in life, the most struggle, the most adversity, some of the hardest times, are some of the most dedicated. And I know this is kind of a blanket statement, it's not meant to be exclusive,
Mm.
if you will. But what I'm saying is, some of the people who care the most have been through the most, and that those challenges have kind of motivated them to change the world for the better. Now we all have our journey, um, and everyone's journey is unique. Was there any point in time, any specific thing that set you on this journey of seeking knowledge, wisdom, enlightenment, and kind of dedicating yourself to helping others? Is there any one moment, or was it just something that kind of culminated over time?
I didn't grow up in a well-off family. I grew up in humble circumstances. Um, I I usually say to people, I have lived in two worlds. Not at the same time, in the process of time, you find yourself having lived, in the urban life, in the city life, At the same time, I had the spell of living in the rural areas where your parents, they send you to granny and you go to school there. And that's where we did, I lived on such, oh boy, sometimes I fail to pronounce some words. Subsistence farming, is it?
Yeah.
Subsistence farming, yeah.
Yeah.
So that's where I learned a great deal about life. Sometimes you will not sometimes that life demanded you to be a shepherd, to mind the cattle, the livestock, take them to the grazing fields, and be exposed to all kinds of things, snakes, and exposed to all kinds of creatures, uh, some wasp, and so that will sting you and get swollen on the body and all that. Sometimes you'll be required to go to the fields and do plowing or harvest before you go to school. That kind of life. I don't think today you handle that. Doing that
No.
before learning. I don't think it
People are eating toaster strudels and watching cartoons,
it's quite a
playing on the
different life.
iPad.
So
Yeah.
so that was really tough. That was really tough because as a matter of fact, I would say we were able to handle that. I was able to handle that because of the kind of food that we ate. We were more closer to nature, unlike today. And you will find yourself exposed to all kinds of natural fruits in the wilderness. Some of them I can't even remember the names, or I can't identify them anyway in the really highly industrialized and urban area. Even you go to Walmart, you go to Smith's or these shops, you find nothing like it. Those were natural, rich, not tempered by anyone trying to divert nature for his own purposes or whatnot. And we had a family garden that we had to work on and rotate all kinds of vegetables. We had an orchard. Some of the fruits they were growing within the home. You don't need to go to the wilderness. We Guavas were as fresh as you can find them in nature, rich, 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 rich colors. I look back and I say that was real life. That was
Yeah.
real life, not what we are experiencing today. So that kind of lack, we always aspire to go to the city and live in the city. It seemed like it was comfortable with TV, and you wanted when you were a kid, you aspire, and
Yeah.
you know what TV does to you. So I don't think I grew up in a wealthy environment. I always had to work hard, even at school. So that made me aspire for greater things. But the story that I want to quickly jump into is after my high school, I lived in South Africa for about 2 years. I was busy with some charity work. And when I was doing service there in about 100 miles south of Johannesburg city in South Africa, there's a location where I was doing service in a local library. And as I was picking the books and organizing them, there is this book that stood out to me, First Things First. It was written by Stephen R. Covey. And just
Yeah.
the philosophical title, First Things First, that's kind of like tautology. So it's confusing. First Things First. So I picked it up and opened the first page, just read there. And I'm like, wow, it just, the book came out into me. I went into it, having this kind of temporal marriage then of the two. And that made me to get my own copy later on that I studied. I did the same thing that you said you will do. Just make sure that you understand what is in every page. Sometimes it takes 6 months
Yes.
reading the same book
Yep.
because you love the knowledge. You want to, you are selfish. You want to take it all and take it all now.
Yeah.
So that's what began the process of interest in spiritual and wisdom literature, self-development literature. From there, it, book after book, just like I've said, the books that were sent to me by Stephen R. Covey. And one thing that I recognize with him, whenever he had footnotes or endnotes, I will go into the endnote and look at who is this author that has such a beautiful quote. And I go to the bibliography And sometimes Stephen R. Covey has a tendency of listing what he termed the wisdom literature. And I'll go in there, find Plato, Confucius, and say, I want this. The Yuka Sutras of Patanjali, the Indian mystic, I want that. Let me go and find the book, buy the book, download. If they are old books, you find them for free online. So that led me from one book to another, and that started that journey, search for knowledge, learning, wisdom, and so forth.
I love it, man. That's how it happens. You know, you find one thing and you get so excited by that, and it leads you to 5 other things or 10 other things, and then next thing you know, you got like 100 books on your wish list, and you just have to chip away at it. And you know, you don't read it all at once, but you might read 10 books this year. You might read 50 books. I don't know, but as you chip away, the more you learn, the more you learn. I know it sounds like redundant, but it's true. The more you
Oh, it's
learn,
true.
the more you learn. And I mean, it's exponentially, it's an exponential process because you build on the foundational knowledge that you already have as you develop it. And then when you go to learn a new thing, it typically interconnects to several other things you've already learned. So then it's a compounding process. You learn more on things that you're already familiar with. So it's crazy. But anyone who's picked up a book or even heard just a clip that resonated with them off of YouTube or anything like that, they understand what we're talking about right now, which is once you get going, once you find one thing that strikes you, that sticks out, it just turns into this journey, and you end up, you know, transforming yourself in the process. So just hearing you describe that life, though, coming from Swaziland and I'm just envisioning this almost like a movie scene. And it just sounds, I know it's hard work, but it sounds so peaceful, and it sounds like a vacation from suburbia. And I just think in some ways, you know, the resources we have and like in terms of medical treatment, you know, if you get hurt, there's a lot of benefits to industrial society, but there's just as many drawbacks. Like when people make it, so to speak, when they make it here, all they want is a house with some land. They want to travel to these places. They want to travel to coastal regions where, again, the fruit is in abundance. It's not being sprayed with pesticides and, you know, Monsanto
Oh,
products everywhere. No, this is
deadly
real
stuff.
stuff. I went to Puerto Rico. I've been twice now. Um, it's been a few years since I went, but the fruit there is so amazing. I mean, a mango the size of a football and it's perfect. Avocados, same thing. You know, I've never seen that in my life here. You get avocado, it's like this hard. They pick it before it even ripens. It's just they don't care. You know, it's just about get the profit. You know, so and it takes weeks to get here. Nothing we're eating is fresh. Nothing. So just to sit down and imagine what that would be like. It's you're trading one one form of wealth for another.
I
That's what I
agree.
think.
No, I
And
agree with you.
somewhere in the middle is the key. It's like if we can do this, if we can leverage technology and resources to our benefit, but not have like that corporate neuroticism about more and more and more profit, profit, profit. You still got to, there's a balance. Like things are going to have to be at a profit, but things don't have to ruin the world in the process. And things don't have to be produced in a way that doesn't serve us. That's just so counterintuitive to me. So I
Just on that, Eric,
go ahead.
I'm sorry. Just on that, because as I've said that I've lived in two worlds, I think about what we have mentioned, some of the institutions such as Monsanto, you know, and think about the way food tests here. I've been here for about 15 months. I'm always like, not that I have disrespect for America or anything. I'm always like, no, the food it just doesn't taste well because I
No.
know 15 months ago I will taste, a guava from the wilderness.
Yeah.
I will taste mango. I will taste all these kind of even vegetables, even meat itself.
Yes.
It's so juicy and so really tasty. Whether it's chicken, whether it's goat, whether it's beef. Here, what I've been eating is like when I boil just beef, this stuff is forming, and you see some fat around the meat, but it doesn't translate to grease. As you are
Yeah.
boiling it, it's just water, and I'm like, what kind of food is this? And
That.
that's the kind of stuff that I feel like, oh boy, I miss Africa for. Because yes,
Yes.
Monsanto is roaming the entire earth, corrupting the soil. I know it's already in Africa big time, because the education, it seems like they had a way of getting into the education, the agriculture education, so
Yep.
that people may believe in Monsanto. And since I've been here, I've had to argue with some Americans about GMOs.
Yeah.
Two arguments that they make, which is quite interesting to me. It doesn't make sense, but it makes sense to them. Monsanto did the work, the psychology very well. One,
Oh yeah.
that there isn't enough to go around for everyone. So we need GMOs. We are starving. In order to cover up for all these gaps or lacunas, we need GMOs. Two, some fruits, you can't have them in a certain season. So we are able to supply them throughout. And I'm like, man, there's just one argument that I have against all that. We are living in nature and the natural, and I know how it's like to live in that life.
Yep.
And when we shift away, because we are nature ourselves, so when we shift away and start eating contrary to our very nature, we corrupt ourselves, we corrupt our brains, we corrupt our bodies. And that's why way back then, there was nothing like cancer, there was nothing like autism, there was nothing like what do you call high blood pressure, or what. These kind of diseases that are, killing a lot of people today. I didn't
Mm-hmm.
know about them way back then when we live in the farm with all this food. Just like the ancient will say, Eric, they will say, all disease is one disease, and food is medicine. And
Yep.
today, those who want to kill us, they also attack us through food. They attack our greatest resource, the land. So that has been my experience. Sorry for taking so much.
No, that's perfect, and I think you hit on some good points, and that's I believe it was Socrates, and of course, I do want to make a distinction here.
Yeah.
Socrates, Aristotle, Plato. We talk about Swaziland. We talk. We haven't talked yet, but about ancient African history and Hermeticism, the mystery schools, and that's probably another conversation.
Yeah.
But the great philosophers of our time learned from the mystery schools in Kemet, which today we, we basically refer to Egypt. That land was the land of Kim,
Hmm.
and this is where they went to. So again, Aristotle, Socrates, Plato, they all went there. That's the motherland of the world.
Yeah.
And this is where the foundational understanding, even from Socrates, would say, uh, let thy food be thy medicine and thy medicine be thy food. And one of his recipes even survived to date, Socrates soup. it's it's just crazy that we're so distracted and mentally dysfunctional to think that, you know, medicine, a pill, it's a chemically synthesized pill derived from plant medicine, but chemically synthesized for mass production, that's the answer to the obvious problems of what's missing in our natural day-to-day: food, water, exercise, sunlight, land, and exposure to chemicals, toxins, genetically modified um, foods, organisms. I mean, we see the effects. That people aren't dying in the millions of heart disease, of stroke, of, you know, all these morbidities, comorbidities. Why do you think we have that? It's like, what's it going to take? But you know, I digress on this tangent here. I think people are starting to wake up. I think the best advice anyone can get right now is to keep it simple. Like if you really operate on that, just keep it simple, you will solve 99.99% of all your own problems in real time. Not years from now, not if you keep it simple, you will have the perspective that it takes to identify. It's like, okay, I have high blood pressure. Okay, why do I have high blood pressure? Well, what's the causes of high blood pressure? Like, just follow the rope on things. But I think we've talked about the difference in worlds, the difference in times, some of the great philosophers. I think we're going to have to meet in the middle at some point. Like, we're going to have to stop this corporate pillaging of the world in order to combine the best of both. Like, industrialism is definitely good in a lot of ways, but in terms of our natural lifestyle, we can't we can't get away from that. Like, we need good food. You talked about eating certain foods and that they don't even taste right. I'm frustrated because there's no store you can go to get real food. It's all factory farmed. Even if you go to Whole Foods and you know, to get some tomatoes, if you've ever grown homegrown tomatoes and you tasted one of those compared to even a Whole Foods tomato, an organic Whole Foods tomato, it doesn't even compare. It tastes like water. It tastes like nothing.
Oh yeah,
You
I
have
agree.
a real fruit or real vegetable. It literally, we don't even taste that stuff. So when you have it, it your mouth basically explodes. Like, I was saying, in Puerto Rico, I tried this fruit. It was insane. All the flavor, all the it revitalizes you. That's what it's supposed to do. It's nourishment. And we don't even know what that is. So I can
Oh yeah.
say, just having grown up here, I lived in suburbia all my life. All I've ever wanted to do is spend the majority of my time on the beach, not doing nothing, but I would just like to live in a tropical region where I can source fresh fruits and vegetables, fresh fish. I mean, I live for that stuff, man. Because once you get a taste of that, you realize it's almost like it feels like everything is fake. That's what it feels like. It feels like the meat is fake. Now the meat is literally fake. They're growing fake meat in the labs. It's not even hypothetical. I mean, it's not even metaphorical anymore. They're
It's
literally making
real.
fake
It's
meat.
there.
Oh my gosh, what have
Oh
we
yeah.
gotten to? So I have had um, like actual kosher. That's probably the closest I've gotten, would be like kosher raised beef.
Hmm.
Oh man, it doesn't even compare to the regular store bought stuff. The flavor isn't you. You basically don't even need seasoning. Of course, it's it's better with seasonings, but it's like the meat tastes so good on its own because of all
Mm.
the the nutrients. It's just nutrient dense meat. Like people don't realize you get a lot of amino acids, you get a lot of vitamins and minerals from properly raised meat. That's a source of nutrition. It's not just protein. But in America, we think meat is protein, the vegetables and all that give us the rest. But if it's not raised right, it's just not going to be right when you eat it. So
Yeah, because everything, Eric, is connected to everything else. You and I know that.
yeah,
I'm sure a lot of people know that. So when the the animal or the cattle or the cow eats the grass turns and becomes the animal. And when I
yes,
eat the animal that ate the grass, the animal becomes me. I become, it tends to be me. And as I have access to the various rich plants, natural plants, because we are all nature together with these other, what I call the kingdom, the vegetation kingdom, animal kingdom, and then the kingdom of man, which is the higher intelligence. We are all connected. That's why we're all connected to each other. That's why if you remove one and you mistreat one and you cause all this emission that they kill plants, dirty water and dirty all this, it becomes dirty food and
that's it.
dirty air. And everybody is affected because of the ecology of things, and that's really not good. But the good thing is, humanity is not dead. Humanity seems to be rising up within the hearts of many people, and people are aware as we are talking. That's awareness that
Yeah.
things are not going okay and we must do something, have our own garden in our backyards when we can be able to afford to have land. And there we have our healthy food and limit the GMOs that are so deadly and causing so many diseases in our lives.
And that's really it. I mean, the only thing eating worse than us is our food. And I mean, all the animals, all the livestock, they're being force fed corn waste, basically corn byproduct. And then they're being pumped full of antibiotics and steroids to force growth, to keep them alive while they're sick. They're sick like any
Yeah.
animal would be in those conditions. And then we're eating that. We're eating trash. We're eating toxic waste, basically. So um, I think people are waking up, though. It's not all negative.
Yeah.
And I'm a firm believer that everything happens for a reason. So do you feel like this kind of has to happen before we can appreciate the balance of nature?
Oh, oh yeah. Malcolm X once mentioned something interesting. He spoke about in order to transform society, you have to shake society. You have to shake the
Mm,
community. I think we are going through the shaking, and without the shaking, we are not forced to reflect of who we are. We remain blind. We walk hibernating down the street, not being
yep.
aware of what's going on. So we occasionally we need some moments of shaking, having this adversity and being aware that, oh well, seems like we are being bombarded with all kinds of crazy things, and where is the safest harbor? What's our refuge? And that's very important that we get this shaking so that we can now all of us collectively awake and start heading the right direction. And those who are really intent in making us sleep more and more, or will be shaken too, they might be thrown out of. As a matter of fact, I would like to think it this way. We have long abdicated the throne and we have allowed people, to stay up there and be the 1% and just driving us, Emerson once said, and now I remember him, things are at the sadly and right man, which is quite interesting. We have allowed so many things to be at the sadly, just like when you are riding your horse, uh, and we are being ridden. And the awakening is important to realize that we've allowed some folks to be at the sideline riding us. And that help us, that pain of going through that slavery, modern day slavery, which is so nuanced or subtly, you'll be able to throw it away. You'll be able to overcome it when we go through this shaking. I think that's important that we go through this shaking that Malcolm X was speaking about.
I think that's right. I mean, I think people are going to continue to take things for granted, to be essentially blind to everything until we hit that point. And I think we're hitting that point now. So before you can jump, maybe you have to hit the ground level first in order to make that jump forward. So that's uh, that's something that I think we have to take into consideration a little bit more. And I think what's missing in all of this is individual responsibility. That's something that was inherent in the lifestyle before. Like you knew you had to be responsible. You knew. Now people are have been programmed, it seems, to look externally, to put that responsibility on someone else, not me, right? I'm not
Yeah.
responsible for my life, my well being. It's someone else's job to make sure I'm taken care of and I'm okay and that the world's right. We need to get back to claiming and, willfully accepting individual responsibility for our collective circumstance. So, with all that being said, we talked about philosophers, we've talked about the difference in lifestyle. We know this is integrated in our being and in our health. What do you feel is going on right now in the world with, and take this where you want, but what do you feel is going on right now in the world, at this current time? I feel that there's an attempt to one last ditch effort to seize power and control over humanity. It seems like a great push in that direction to somewhat of a dystopian future. Um, there's a lot of stuff going on, but in your own words, how do you see things right now? What do you feel is going on in the world?
I think we are living in a very raucous time. It's noisy, and it's difficult to concentrate, except when you turn to spirituality and do meditation and turn within, because all power comes from within. When we turn within, we are able to again rediscover ourselves or gain ground. I think today, you know, when you ask this question, I think of politics, I think of the world of medicine. The other day, I posted on social media that the greatest marriage of our generation is the marriage between medicine and politics. And
Mm,
at the same time, it is the most disastrous marriage that has happened, because today we have things such as coronavirus. Whatsoever is being said about the origin, whether it's coming from animals or coming from a lab, I don't want to go there. You see the play of politics, and the people who go to school, you know, to do medicine, they've got no idea. It seems like, as somebody once mentioned, they've got no idea what's going on. But psychologists seem to have been, been at work on this. because at first, when this thing hits, or when this thing came, I was scared what's going on, we're going to die. Look at this virus that is being sent out there in the world. I mean, that is just roaming the earth and sending us into our homes and, lockdowns. But after a while, being a lover of knowledge, trying to search a little bit, and then you get off mainstream, and then you find doctors who are consistent
Yes.
with what the virus is and what it does in your body. And on the other hand, we've got people like Dr. Fauci and the World Health Organization. They're hip hopping. They're here, they're there, they're changing. They're saying one thing, the next day they change after some few months and say, go back to this. Oh, well, we don't know about this virus, so we are kind of like learning it. But there are certain doctors who have been just consistent from March, telling us what the virus is and what it does in the body, how to deal with it at a very individual level. We even can go in at the institutional level. So you realize there, as you have said, that there is this thing of trying to control, and now we are being driven to think that the Messiah for mankind against this devil called the virus is a vaccine and nothing else. And somebody like me, who has lived in a world where food is medicine, closer to nature, and I'm saying to myself as I watch some of the honest doctors talking about this, I know there is garlic, I know there is turmeric, I know there is ginger, and you name all these that can disrupt the works of the virus within. And I've lived in Africa. Whenever we have flu, whatever strands of flu, always it's not about the Western medicine thinking a drug. It's about organizing these vitamin C lemons and put together with honey, with garlic, and with ginger. And you are able to work that one out. And as I studied in this whole what I will term darkness, and I'm like, wow, this is interesting that we are being diverted. Anybody who wants to speak about garlic as a solution, the natural, plants, is taken down,
Mm-hmm.
censored, and
Yep.
stuff like that. And you realize how medicine and politics, that marriage is become so disastrous, and it has never been so exposed how disastrous it is than in this virus. Eric, that has been fascinating to me. But I am hopeful there are so many people who are waking up. You are one of them who's aware of what's going on and joining hands, and others that are having groupings all over the world trying to get back to reality and not follow the mainstream of things, mainstream politics, mainstream science, what others call sales science, because really it becomes a sales science rather than real science that we should be having, And the
Yeah.
unfortunate thing that people that I've met here who, when they, suddenly woke up to realize the dealings of men, they found the Western way of medicine, which is drugs. Once we've got a headache, go for a drug. This little pain, go and see if you can do surgery. Some things that we never worried about, we never worry about in Africa because of the way we have lived our life. So people, I find myself interacting with people and kind of like saying, you know what, there is Western medicine which does its part. If you get into a car wreck and you break your
Yes.
limbs, it's very valuable. But there is West Eastern medicine, Africa going to the east. You find that it's more defensive. It's more, it's the way you have to eat, the way you treat yourself, avoiding certain sicknesses. And that is not anywhere in what the WHO is saying. Nothing about the immune system, such a powerful system in our body, but always let's go to the vaccines. So that's what I've observed, Eric.
Yeah. And that's an interesting point because how do we have a discussion about health without discussing the immune system, without discussing the essential vitamins and minerals? And that includes trace minerals like zinc, selenium,
Mm.
magnesium, and there are more. But how do we have a discussion about health and not cover these things? This is, I would just like to invite people to question everything and to really think about how does their body work? Like, if you know how it works, you know how to take care of it. When you get a car, a vehicle, typically comes with an owner's manual. It tells you
Mhm.
how much fluids to put in, what type, there's instructions. We don't come with instructions, unfortunately, but we do have access, at least, to the knowledge and wisdom of the rest of humanity across time. Yeah, it's fragmented, but we have quite a bit to work with in terms of how to holistically maintain our health. And it seems like, you know in Western culture, that's not really brought up. It's not about health, it's about medicine.
Mm. I
So I
agree.
feel like we're really putting the cart before the horse, the cart before the horse
Yeah.
on that. So, um, what do you think it's going to take? I mean, we talked a little bit about this, I guess. We're going to have to go through this. We're going to have to do our best individually. We're going to have to take this one day at a time, communicate with each other. And it's kind of weird how the push for isolation has come through. There's a strong push, basically the opposite of togetherness, which is what you need to overcome things. Um, but it's more. You still see people going in the stores. There's like hundreds of people, shopping in Target, Walmart, Home Depot, whatever it is. But I'm not even going to get started on the masks. People are in proximity and they're having contact with one another in certain circumstances. And without getting too much on, the whole virus thing and all this, it's contradictory. It just seems like the whole world is backwards. It's like, okay, doing that at home is not okay, or at the gym, or even just, coming together and cooperating on something. But going shopping at these corporate stores, that's just fine. It's perfectly safe, right? It's like,
Yeah.
it's so
It's
backward. Everything is so backwards. And
yeah.
it's like, okay, there's an immune threat, right? Call it what you want. There's an immune threat sweeping the world. And so stay inside, keep a mask on, right? At all times, and basically do things that we know make you immune compromised. In response, I don't know. I think it's like you said, it's sales science at this point. It seems like this has been kind of a long time in the making, and I won't go into those details on here. I'm sure you've seen me post some things here and there, but
Yeah.
I'll just say it seems like this has been a long time in the making.
Yeah. Yeah.
Seems like there's been a systematic approach to trying to break the psychological sense of community for a while. How does that differ from, back home for you? I would imagine it's just a given that you have to have community, you have to have family values intact. You have to be, I'm sure things aren't perfect, but like you said, it's kind of when no choice is the best choice sometimes,
Yeah.
because you had to, you had to. And there's some inherent value in that. Whereas here, people don't think they need anyone until they do. And,
Mm.
we go along, people can order their food, they can order their groceries, they can order what they want all off their phone and sit in the apartment or sit in their room all day and work from home. Some people don't even have to leave the house anymore, and they're not.
Yeah.
And that's just bizarre to me. It's
Yeah.
like, what's the point of living? That's basically a jail cell. It's basically a prison.
Well, Eric, in Africa, you might have heard me talk about this, some of the values. There is one thing that cuts across, or I would say it's structural in Africa, in every African country. There's this thing we call the spirit of Ubuntu. You might have heard me speak about that, which is just in a philosophical language, we say, I am because you are. Because you are, therefore I am. Or I am because we are. Because we are, therefore I am. That means, speaks about we are connected to each other. As Adam Markham's, is it Edwin Markham's? I think he says that we are all angels with one wing, and we only fly when we embrace each other. You know, that's the fabric of the African society. We move as groups. We still believe in community. If we hear that somebody in the community is sick, people go in there to see how they can help and help the person. Whenever there is a funeral, whole community comes together. They start talking. Hey, so and so has passed on there. From the first day they hear that, people flock into that home. Other, our senior parents, they stay in there and kind of like helping the family, um, up until the day of a night vigil and funeral. People are there, and after the funeral, still you will have members of the community in that home there to do service and see how they can help. So in the Western world, I don't see that. Mostly, as people say, in the West is more individualistic. So in Africa, it's all about community. And as we grew up, there is something really fascinating. We still look back and talk about it. If you mess up in the community, an elderly person is passing and you are doing some naughty business, that elderly person is your parent too, because they're going to grab you and whip you. That's how
Yeah.
community works. That's how we kept the values in our African communities. Your parents are not only your parents, they also parent other children as they see on the street, so that the community is organized, there are less crimes, everybody is vigilant and taking care of each other. Your parents will not come to your neighbor and say, why were you beating my child and whatnot. When they hear that you got beaten, because
I already know. You're gonna get whooped again.
big time, man.
That's I already knew it, man. I already knew it. Hey, some of us grew up like that here. So I better not get in trouble by anybody as a kid because the same thing.
Yeah,
Same
yeah.
thing, man.
So that's how the values are kept, and you grew up in all the
Yeah.
setup where you have to take responsibility. If you come back
Yeah.
and you are holding your arm close to yourself because somehow it's been hurt, you fell from a tree, you are in for it because you will get whipped. Why did you go up to the extreme branches of the tree? We want you don't do APCT, you get whipped before you are taken care of. Oh, and when they take care of you,
Yeah.
there's no grudge. They will really show that your mother or your grandma loves you and takes care of you, put the bandage around, and they nurse you, they give you food and all these things, extra nursing that you hardly get when you are all fine. You see that everything is done in balance. So that's the kind of world that I grew up in and how the values are kept. And when you grow up and see this responsibility. Community meetings, the chief in the community will, in his chiefdom, call upon the people to come together for meetings that geared towards making the community better. If there's been a rise of crimes, or they hear that there is some few youngsters or gangs that are roaming around and taking people's things and doing all this. They have to have a community meeting. It's not an individual thing. It's not an issue of having a system of police officers that we must ring and they run and they are looking for, they're doing investigation. They take responsibility. There is community policing in a sense, such that if we catch you committing an offense or the family was able to recognize you, we go around the neighborhood hunting for you and you'll be beaten, really, really beaten. So there's been all this community thing of doing things for safety, for healthy, for all this, for emotional boost whenever you have lost someone or you are sick. If you are sick, you are in a hospital, people flock in there to see how you're doing and all that. So that's the community. I don't mean that in the West you don't see that, but the you know, I grew up in that kind of setting, Eric.
And I think we could definitely use more cultural values in that sense because it's kind of empty culturally. There's no basis, there's no standard. It's just kind of like whatever programming comes down through mainstream media or whatever is the current focus, that's the new
Mm,
thing. So like all this political correctness and all this, to me, it's noise. It's a bunch of nonsense. Why is it always something? Why is it always a polarized
mm,
issue that it wasn't there before, and now all of a sudden it's the biggest problem in the world? It's like we're force fed problems, but we focus everything on problems, but not on
oh,
solutions.
yeah.
So when you come with a solution, it's unheard. It falls on deaf ears. You can literally give the solution to any given problem. It's not going to matter. People aren't interested in the solution. They're interested in the problem. They're interested in uh, being malicious, having a reason to attack others, whether it's socially or whatever. And, we have cancel culture, we have this, we have that, but it's like, are we actually wanting solutions, or are we just wanting to fight about problems? And this is something that crosses my mind when I hear about, a particular issue or whatever may be going on. It's just like, what's what's the desired result from these actions? That's why I like to keep the end in mind. Why am I doing A, B, and C? And I think people have slowly forgotten how to solve their own problems, or that they even can solve their own problems. And when you have a community that holds each other accountable, that practices responsibility and maintains those standards and those values, you live in a different world. And it's so backwards. It's like people are getting punished for for excuse me.
Yeah.
So people are getting punished for menial things, but then you have serious criminals, pedophiles, violent assailants, you know, getting getting out on probation or getting, walking away from charges. It just seems like we're almost promoting as much dysfunction as possible at times. And again, not to be negative, I think that can change just as quickly in the other direction. But it seems like when you lose the value system at the family community level, it reflects across the whole of society. So I think that's something that's missing, and it's not too late to change it.
Oh, yeah, I agree, Eric. It's just to hop into that loop. As you speak about, the challenges that values are facing today and the beautiful cultures that have founded our communities, I think about as an attorney, I think about what we call human rights. the West is known so much with, people lobbying for their rights. My right this, my right that. You can't do this or do that. That's my right. You are violating my right. People are always, litigating and speaking out loud for their rights, but they forget, or they are not conscious that connected to rights is connected to a right is a duty. These are corresponding. You can't have a right and then there is no duty. You must be conscious of the fact that there are duties too. And the West doesn't speak much. Nobody says, "Oh well, that's my duty. You shouldn't be doing A, B, C, D because that's my duty." We are more about rights and leaving the other aspects that is intrinsically connected to rights. And as I look at that and I think about what happens in the 60s when it comes to this thing of rights, there started to be rising people who are called themselves liberals and whatnot. I'm not saying I have anything against them, wherein there's a sudden uh, awakening of some sort to something that is old, really. Everybody knows human beings have got rights. That's my property. You can't just come and do with it anyhow. But that sudden rise made people to move away from what you were talking about, the values, and they started questioning the very thing that has founded our communities. As I've said, they are questioning and wanting to destroy the very thing that has given us the community, the very thing that has given us some of these beautiful structures that have endured the test of time. Because we come with a mindset of right, 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 and forgetting that we have duty, as we have been saying repeatedly, the importance of taking responsibility. How can you speak about the right without the responsibility? How can you speak about the right in a sense that suggests that your right is endless? Because where your right ends, the right of another begins. That duty, it's not brought into the discussion. The West is just so much about right, 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 and no duty. I don't know if that makes sense, Eric.
Yeah, it does. And again, I think it just goes back to the difference is other cultures are doing what makes sense. I mean, they're basically keeping it simple and focusing on a solution. And I think that's what's missing. So we'll do all this legwork and all this running around just to get nowhere. It's just for the sake of it. It's for the sake of having a position and being upset about something. And in a large way, I feel like our society has de-evolved, if you will, into sort of a like the nature or behavior of like a spoiled child. It's just it's not serving anyone, and the values that are inherent in other cultures are missing here under these circumstances. So I think we can change it. I think it's going to take individuals like ourselves choosing to do what we can when we can with what we've got. And I'd like to know, with everything going on, you're launching the excuse me, you've launched the podcast, you're working on that, you've got your legal practice going on. What is the single greatest challenge you're currently facing in getting this all off the ground and growing into something larger?
Eric, you remind me of something that I did. I hope, I think you being a good man, you did not hold grudge against me. you know, I'm thinking of technology. When I took a deep dive into reading wisdom literature, I sus- I suspended this whole thing of being on social media. In fact, I've never been so active in social media until I came to the US. Sometimes I'll go for 6 months without going into Facebook. The other ones I just never tried, like Instagram, Twitter, and whatnot. So I think that has been a challenge, technology. There was a time where I used to do photography. I was familiar with softwares and I would go around try editing and whatnot. But somehow that has been washed away because my focus was so much more spirituality. so much more learning out of the good books, reading. Whenever I am by myself, I make time. As a matter of fact, I thirst for knowledge, and I will make time almost every day to read. Nothing about technology. So I felt like when I have to start podcasting, boy, one of the things that have made me sweat. I think you have seen I've asked you a lot of questions and about how to do this or do that. I'm trying to, sometimes I go to YouTube. That has been the biggest challenge because when you do podcasting, you must get out there, you must have social media presence. People must know about what you are doing so that they may follow. It's another argument whether the content is rich. I believe we have, I invite really great people who share rich content. So, uh, in some, the challenge has been technology and just advertising what I'm doing and getting out there. That's has been one challenge for me because I come back from work tired after reading the entire day, writing the entire day, and I come back, I still need to kick into gear, into now switch my mind into podcasting, learning as we're going through the course. Oh boy, I had some of my biggest stresses because I know I need to come back and try and figure one thing out. And I see people are going on. Some of the things that helped me was to see Eric doing, having done one thing, or maybe module two or so, and I'm like, oh, that's what they mean. I was still trying to figure it out. And then I would ask somebody, how do you get to do this? How do you, all these, how do you, have given me a lot of stress as far as technology is concerned. I think that's what has been, that has caused me to move at a chameleonic pace, and yeah, that has been the biggest challenge, technology.
Yeah, and I think it's it's technology, but it's also because it's something new. And oftentimes people underestimate how challenging it can be to not just learn something new, but then execute on it. So it's almost like being a baby again. You're starting at zero with something. You have to learn it, and then you have to learn how to then do it. So you have to learn to understand it, and then you have to learn how to do it. And but I think you're doing great, man. I think the technology and all this, it's been a challenge. It's going to continue to be a challenge for everyone forever. It's evolving so quickly. Things are always changing, but if that's your biggest challenge, I think you're doing pretty good. So you're doing all right, and it's good to see things coming to fruition. I think one thing stuck out with my interview with Marwin recently, which was new equals opportunity. That's something that ended up coming up, in the midst of our discussion, and it kind of rang a bell. New equals opportunity. Whatever it is, whatever field, whatever is going on, it always equates. It always equates. New equals opportunity. And this is opportunity for you to help more people. I mean, spread enlightenment, and if nothing else, just show, hey, like, you don't have to live in this box mentally. You don't have to stay in one place. You can learn new things. You can continue to grow and develop, and it's okay to fail. You can push into trying something new, and if it doesn't work out, it's okay. It's not the end of the world, but I think by seeing other people do new things, it inspires others to do the same in their own interest, in their own right, to just go out there and do something. So I think that's really powerful. I've enjoyed the few episodes of your podcast that I have listened to. I think I told you off camera, but I'll say it on here as well. It's like you have an advantage in your podcast in having an accent. It's not a disadvantage. It
And
sounds
I think it's a
it sounds
disadvantage.
no, it sounds more legit. It sounds more interesting, more official. Somebody might hear me and just be like, oh, okay, another guy. But they hear it, they're like, whoa, hold on, who's this guy? It's interesting.
Yeah.
to hear. At least that's how I found most people view it. It's just interesting to see um, the same, maybe the same content, but if you're saying the same, if we're both saying the same thing, and someone hears me, okay, they may listen to it. If someone hears you, that's what I'm saying. You've got an advantage there because it sounds more sophisticated when you have an accent.
Yeah.
So,
I'm
how does it? Is it the same coming from another native language? Is it your own native language? Is it the same when you hear English speakers, or maybe it doesn't have to be English, but when you hear someone else with an accent, how do you perceive that?
Oh, well, I, our world, or at least I know from Southern Africa, with the introduction of things such as TV and all that, and watching this Hollywood stuff, we grow up aspiring and being interested in speaking the language as fluent as you guys speak the language. And we kind of like censor each other, which is kind of foolish, really. When somebody doesn't speak with that English accent, like from UK or American accent, you know, when you speak with that kind of accent, people they feel like that's cool. You feel like you know English, and to me, when you grow up, you realize that's something for boys. That's foolish. We shouldn't be censoring each other. Other people they stammer as they speak the language because it's the second language. They still have to go through the mind and translate what they are trying to say, and there is that kind of scolding that a person will receive because you are stammering, you seem not to be fluent with the language. So it's quite a negative report that I can give you on that. But at the same time, when somebody comes from West Africa coming down to Southern Africa, they've got a different accent. People from Nigeria and from the West, hey, my brother, and all that, the way they pronounce things, it becomes interesting to us from Southern Africa because of the accent that they come with. So to some degree, I would say, yeah, when you hear somebody with a different accent, you want to listen more. I've got a friend from Kenya. He interned with Boeing just a couple of months ago, and he was saying he has discovered this advantage that people listen more because he's got accent, so he takes advantage of that. Because I was like, oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I think that much I can say.
Yeah, so definitely keep the accent. Don't don't do language coaching or anything to get rid of it. It's an advantage for sure. And I think we're naturally interested in other cultures, other accents, the minor distinctions, and we tend to be the most critical of ourselves, so we can feel self-conscious about these things or try end up mistakenly perceiving it as a negative, but it's definitely an advantage. It's just it makes you who you are. So um, embrace that. Definitely, like I said, it makes things more interesting. People are listening. Sounds more official, and
I wanted to
I
say
think it just
something,
adds.
Eric,
Yeah,
when you mentioned that when you had an interview with Marwin, and one thing that stuck out, takeaway was that new means opportunity. And it made me think about a definition of like that I learned about, which came out in the 60s. I think it was L. Nightingale when he was defining like, when you go to the dictionary, like is defined something like getting something without, having any effort to it, you know. But for the first time, I learned from him this powerful definition that when preparedness meets opportunity, that's what luck is. And you made me think about that new means opportunity. So when you prepare yourself and you are in sync, or you are moving with the moving times, there are a lot of opportunities that will come to you, and opportunity becomes, I mean, luck just becomes that. Some people will say, oh, Eric is so lucky, he's now having a podcast, he's having a business. We all know that in a universe governed by law, there's no such thing as luck, really. It's all about what you do privately. As Stephen
Yeah.
R. Covey speaks about in his book, public victory is private victory. There is so much that you go through privately in order to have the business that you have, in order to do podcasting. There's a lot of work. So when things happen, things are attracted to you. James Allen once said that we don't get what we want, we get what we are. And that's the law. We attract our very own. Everything that happens to us is no chance. That's what we are. So I thought that I would bring up this interesting definition on luck, which has helped me understand a lot about life.
Yeah, and you brought up Earl Nightingale, and I really have to credit, the beginning of my journey to Earl Nightingale. There's a book, he, to my knowledge, this is the first audiobook ever made, which is The Strangest Secret. It came out on record.
Yeah, I know that one.
And so, man, that one changed my life for sure. The Strangest Secret by Earl Nightingale. And that's where he talks about, you know, everything you just said. And so I take that, I run with it, and these things synthesize in the back of your mind as you learn and grow and develop and carry out your own journey, and then you build on that. And that's what we're doing. They built on the teachings of others in the past, and we're all just in this synthesis together. Everyone is interconnected, and not just metaphorically, but energetically. We're all putting out energy and absorbing energy. And it's just this light matrix, basically. That's what we're in. We're just in this crazy. I don't know what to make of it all. I don't know how to explain it, but I'm a student of life, if you want to call it that. I'm always seeking truth. I'm always seeking answers to help live a better life and hopefully serve others more efficiently. So I think that's what it's all about. Um, what do you think for someone listening right now? We've covered a lot. It can be overwhelming for some. What would you like to leave people with here today if they had to take away one thing from this conversation?
I think that's a great question, Eric. It makes my mind to race and think about all these philosophical things that I think about that I've come to learn. You know, I think there's one thing that I always want to mention to people, but let me mention just two things. Life is demanding a lot today. There's a lot of noise. We've spoken about that here. It's easy. There are so many voices. It's easy to be confused. It's easy to have a day, a week, and a month pass by and not realize what you've been doing. It's easy, to be purposeless in the way you do things. There's just a lot. You can have friends coming in and taking you, going out and playing, and you don't say no because people plan on you. If you don't have plans, people plan. You have to live under the plans of other people. So there's a lot happening today, Eric, that may you know that burdens the mind, that make us be attracted to ephemeral fancies, things that are just not permanent. With all the difficult things that we are facing today, with all these lockdowns and all the bombardment with all kinds of information which may not really help us in the long run. I am reminded of words by Henry Frederick. I think I should have the quotation here. He says, "He who is silent is forgotten. He who does not advance falls back. He who stops is overwhelmed, outdistanced, crushed. He who ceases to grow becomes smaller. He who leaves off gives up. The condition of standing still is the beginning of the end. I think we want to keep going. We want to, if there is war, we need to keep on going. The war against the mind and war against anything that we are trying to do, war against good. We need to do our best and be like people of the 6th century BC and the 18th, the 6th century BC, people of the 19th century who, in my little reading, they seem to have been great men who were men of contemplation, men of prayer, people who turned within and awaken the powers within them, because all power comes from within. I think we don't want to, sit back. We don't want to allow to ourselves to be overwhelmed or distanced or crushed. We need to keep going. We need to keep studying, keep learning, and go out and find some of the good books. There are a lot of good books out there. Follow great shows. YouTube, there are great thinkers there who are sharing their knowledge, who are sharing their voices. Follow that to motivate you, to keep you going. And one other thing is meditation is a very old thing that the ancients lived on. Today it's coming up again. And sometimes they want to refer to it as mindfulness. That's a very important thing to calm down the noise that we are all experiencing. And be humble and be ready to learn always. Somebody once said that water does not flow upstream, water flows downstream. Neither does milk. Milk, in order to get the milk from the cow, you have to come down in order to get the milk. That's all humility. And the ancients put it in a form of a prayer, and they would say, from the cowardice that shrinks from new truths, from the laziness that is content with half truth, from the arrogance that thinks it has all the truth, oh God of truth, deliver us. So humility all the way.
I was hoping to bring some of that out of you, because I know you got those those golden
Nuggets.
those golden quotes in there, man. That's your thing. That's your thing for sure. Who was the first quote by?
It was
Because it's incredible that you even, I've never heard that quote, but I was just thinking last night in the shower. I was, finishing up the shower, and some thought just came into my mind that if you if you stay still, you fall behind. That's literally the thought that I had. And then you say this quote. That's why my mind was blown when you just said that. So, who was that quote by
what I will
again?
do, I will send it to you. It's Henry
Yeah.
Frederick Amiel. So Henry,
Okay.
that is Henri, and then Frederick is Frederic, and then the surname is Amiel, which is it's Amiel. Amiel. So Henry
Okay.
Frederick Amiel.
Yeah. Man, I'm telling you, I'm glad I brought that out of you at the end. You got the you got the golden quotes, man.
Yeah.
You're just laying blessings on people right now. To anyone listening, you heard some gold right there. Two of them at the end. So that's incredible, man. Do you do any writing yourself? Do you write your own little quotes, stuff like that?
Oh,
Your own reflections?
oh, Eric, let me say this one interesting thing. I think I saw you posting on social media in our podcast group. You talked about the importance of recording your thoughts. And I'm like,
Yes.
man, I always lose track of all the good things that I do, sometimes because of the noisy world. And here
Yep.
is Eric reminding me of something that I used to do. And I'm like, thank you, Eric. I didn't tell you. Thank you, Eric. It
Oh
just
man.
reminded me that I need to write my thoughts again. In my phone,
Yes.
whenever thoughts come, I used to have a lot of those in my phone. So when you spoke about it, I was like, oh man, when last did I do this? when I concentrated and I thought of something great that comes into my mind and put it down, I'm like, thank you, Eric, for serving me. Somebody in the 1800s, I think it was Brian S. Hinckley, speaking about service. He said, service is the virtue that distinguishes the Creator of all time, and by which they will be remembered. And it is he spoke about it. It places a mark of nobility upon its disciples, and it is the dividing line that separates the two great groups in the world: those who lift and those who lean, those who give and those who only consume. Service in any form is comely and beautiful. So thank you for reminding me about that one.
Thank you, man. Thank you for sharing. Man, I don't know how you pull I really don't know how you pull all these quotes off the top of your head. That's amazing. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm glad I could uh, jog that positive habit again with your mind. That's what I'm saying. I think you've got some of your own reflections and some of your own thoughts between all the content that you've consumed and your intention that you're bringing. I think you would have your own substantial thoughts, realizations, and reflections to write down. I'd be interested in hearing some of that. So do you? I do have a somewhat of a surprise question for you here at the end. So I'm a person of affirmations. I shared mine on Facebook with the world. So I wanted to ask you, do you have a particular set of affirmations that you would like to share today? You know, not the whole thing, you share what you want, but is there any bit of affirmations or some mantra or something that you kind of live by or go back to that you might want to share with people?
Oh, well, let me begin with some of the, I'm trying to remember. Recently, I've written a thought down here. You asked me about if I do write down some of my thoughts, and I'm trying to recognize something that I've written in my phone. I'm just trying to page through quickly. I think there are a lot of things. I hope I'll be able to find the right one here. I
Oh,
think
go ahead.
written, I was talking about the plant and the seed. And I said the plant, seed, and nature, or plant the seed and nurture it, and it will grow to a tree that will provide shade. That will provide shade, bear fruits, and supply medicine in the times of need. So that's something that came into my mind. And I also speak about some of the challenges that I've had in life, midlife crisis and all that. And it took me back to Egypt, Africa, ancient Africa, when a pharaoh had a dream that fascinated all the clever people way back then. And there was Joseph who came and interpreted the dream where he saw 7 cows coming out of the big waters, and those were really fat and healthy, and then 7 other ones they came and consumed on the the ones that were fat. And was Joseph said, no, you will have 7 years of famine, of plenty, and will be followed by 7 years of famine, which is nothing else but the law of rhythm, you know ebb and flow. So I say, in your 7 years of plenty, put in store something like a camel does, so that when the pendulum swings you to your winter season and you feel empty, you will live in the memory of the plenty in the 7 years of your famine, memory of sunshine. And that storage of inner light will provide enough sustenance until you return to plenty. If you have built a strong will, you will you will will forward and not be destroyed by the season of famine, but shall weather the storm. So that's a thought that I had recorded, thinking about some of the 7 years of famine that we'll go through, speaking figuratively, and some of the 7 years of plenty that we go through. When the sun is out, you want to bask in the sun. so that when it's down and it's winter season, it's cold, you can live in the memory of the beautiful sun and look forward to some sunrise and sunshine again. I think that's what happens in our life as we go through ebb and flow and we exercise our will to overcome the ebbs and the flows of life. No, I don't know if I made sense in what I was sharing.
Yeah, definitely. And see, I knew you were trying to hide over there. I knew you had some good writings to share. I knew you had some good writings to
I
share,
wasn't
man.
hiding, I forgot. There's a lot, but I shared just a little.
Yeah, I know. I see the way you think and quote things, and I'm like, there's no way you don't have your own thoughts on this type of stuff. So
Oh
you're
yeah,
very
I forgot
philosophical.
something in what you had asked me about a mantra. You
Yeah,
and
or
I know this.
affirmations, any
Yeah, an
affirmations or
affirmation. There's
mantras.
only one thing that I occasionally go back to. I've not been good with writing a lot of affirmations. There's only one that when I go through difficult times and I remember that I am a spiritual being having a human experience, not a human being having a
Yeah,
spiritual experience. And I am connected to all these great things of life. I am part of this great movement of life. And my spiritual DNA traces me just one step back to God. I don't need to do some genealogy and researching my great great grandparents. My spiritual DNA goes back there, and I am part of, the great whole. And there I start to remember and start thinking about spirituality and seeing that a lot of the things that are worrying me are just appearances. All power comes from within, as I've always said. This is power. I can go back inside and deal with this and have power come out of me and deal with the problem that I'm facing. So that's about the thing that I occasionally go back to about the spirituality.
yeah, that's one that's resonated with me as well. I first heard a guy, his name is Ralph Smart. His channel, you may have come across him on YouTube, Infinite Waters. But he's pretty popular now. But he was the first person I actually heard say that we're infinite beings having a human experience. I think that's definitely a powerful mantra or reminder to go back to, especially during hard times. Is you know we truly are more than our bodies. We're more than this one experience. I can't prove it. I can't, explain it all, but it definitely, as you go through life and you aim in a higher direction and you go through these struggles, and you brought up, midlife crisis, and it's just such a part of life that you need these things to revert back to help establish an understanding and know that the sun will rise again tomorrow. You know, the winter is temporary. Everything has an ebb and flow. Everything has that duality. And I don't know if it's true, but I heard somewhere else, the night is darkest just before the dawn. And
Oh yeah.
that's how things that's how things go. So midlife crisis. I mean, that's always fun, right? You want to go into that? That sounds fun. Tell us about that,
Oh yeah.
and then we'll wrap up after that.
Oh,
I want to give you a chance to go into that, and I know people can find strength in others' experience. So
um, midlife crisis. Uh, uh, I consider myself to be still going through midlife crisis, and I always believe, from what I've heard from other people and from my own experiences, that they are triggered by something that happens in your life that shakes you. Just like I've said, that the words from Malcolm X, that in order to change society, you must shake society. In order for change this society of limbs and organs, you must shake that society. That is me. Shake it in order to awaken to a higher level. Sometimes you find that we are laboring on the same level of consciousness or the same plane, find that we have fulfilled our purpose there, and we need to be checked up to a higher level or be pushed over the cliff by life itself if we're not going to jump to a whole new world of some sort. So nature has got a way of just tilting you, and everybody that speaks about midlife crisis and have overcome that, they're introduced into a whole new world. They may still be living in the same house, the same community, but they view it from a different perspective. So 7 years ago, my mother passed away, and I felt, I still think about her every day. I think somehow I've been, having some kind of downward spiraling. I used to have a lot of passion for motivation and all stuff like that. When I speak, I will feel the energy, and I will create this context to those people in the room who are listening, and they will feel it. You can see that everybody's concentration is at a high level. And over this past 7 years since my mother passed away, I feel like I've been, there's been some degeneration of some sort, spiritually speaking, and feeling a feeling of emptiness, meaninglessness. Somebody once said that in order to be a philosopher, you must come to a point where you disbelieve everything. I went through that after she passed away, where I felt like just an empty vessel going to work. I'm a Christian going to church, coming back home. I find myself revolving around those three places, not excited about going out, trying to attempt and create activities to have fun and all that. And one thing that kept me going within was the love for wisdom, always turning to the pages and reading. So that emptiness, disbelief of everything. I didn't believe I was alive. I would always pinch myself trying to say, am I really alive? I didn't believe the other person was alive. It wasn't a conviction within. I felt like everything, just like Solomon in his wisdom says, meaningless, meaningless. Everything is meaningless. I came to that state where everything was just meaningless. If somebody will say death is coming, oh well, fine, so what? When you get to that level of meaninglessness. So over the years, I felt like I've been battling with that and been trying to understand the psychology of that. Others say that that thing can take up to 10 years, going through that experience. I had Gary in my platform yesterday, having an interview with him, and he was speaking about his experience too of midlife crisis and how he came out of it. And the thing that we ended up zeroing down to is meditation, gratitude, which is something I do in the morning and before I go to bed. I had to go. This is not something new. I've done this before, but sometimes you lose track. So we ended up, saying this is the best practice that will help you suppress all the anxieties. As the ancients have said, that if you are depressed, you are living in the past. If you have anxieties, you are living in the future. If you are happy, you are living in the now. In order to live in the now, you have to, well, that's me now. I think that's why I use the word have. You have to do mindfulness. We have to meditate. And in connection with the law of increase, anything that you praise, you pass gratitude for, grows, it increases. Your business, Eric, when you keep on praising it every day, it grows. The orchard, it becomes so beautiful and lovely. When you send the energy of love, things change in our natural world. I know people who, when they have chickens, they keep chickens, natural chickens at home in Africa. There are times where people will be like, what's up with Eric? Chickens, they seem to love him. You give him one, all of a sudden they multiply. People think that's chance, that's law. Some people, they know to naturally, even unaware, to connect energy of love to plants, to animals, and things respond accordingly. So gratitude and mindfulness, I think they are very important to calm us down in a very raucous and noisy way. By kind of summing up, mathematician James, Bertrand Russell, he was an English mathematician and philosopher. He spoke about that he wasn't born happy, and he was constantly, during adolescence, he was constantly at the verge of committing suicide. But something magical was happening within, deep in the heart, that kept him away from committing suicide. And that thing was desire to know more about mathematics. Even though he had suicidal thoughts, but something deeper in the heart, the burning flame, as small as it was, that desire to know more about mathematics kept him going. But there is one thing that for a lesson that he mentioned, he says the reason he was so suicidal and depressed is because he had focused so much on his inadequacies, his sins, his negative things. And those things, the law of focus says that anything you focus on grows. So when he focused on that, it kept on growing. And that's why his mind was clouded with darkness, and he felt like things were meaningless to him, and he wanted to commit suicide. But when applying the law of focus properly and changing and shifting his focus to things outside him, things that were interesting, various strengths or various disciplines of knowledge, focusing on other people, and all that, things change, and he found himself more fulfilled because he was focusing on other people. I think that's one thing that we must learn, is to apply the law of focus properly and focus on the right things, do mindfulness, and the law lose ourselves to others in serving others. I think that, to me, those are key things that keep me going.
I think, first of all, thank you for sharing that, because I know it's a difficult subject to talk about. And, it's a very profound thing to experience that and to try to navigate through it. And it's nature reflects a lot of the patterns we experience within our own lives. You know, it can be chaotic, it can be violent, it can be tragic, but there's still something in there. There's still some balance. There's still some, and I'm referencing nature, but even, the most chaotic fires bring fertilizer, they bring growth, they bring new life, and I think in terms of the people we care about the most, our parents, our grandparents, our close family and friends, and at least in terms of family, these people, they're they may be gone but not forgotten, and they may be gone from their physical form, but the reality is, from a genetic standpoint, they're living through you, and that's a spiritual perspective as well. But I feel like we're, again, from a literal genetic standpoint, we are the product of, and we are the vessel for all of our ancestors. We have a great responsibility to carry them forward to higher ground, to spread that seed, so to speak, that seed of life, in the same way that the the oak tree, or the whatever plant or tree you want to reference, life has a way of populating itself, evolving in a positive direction, and living through to a form of liberation. And I think it's our job to keep that perspective, that forward perspective. And it's easier said than done. It's not an easy thing to deal with, and I'm definitely not an expert on it. But I try to, see some positive or some light or some way in which we're we're doing service to past and future generations, past, present, and future. And we all get our shot to live in the present, however long or short that may be. But we have to live it, the gift of the present. How does the saying go? Um, the past is history, tomorrow's a mystery, but today is the present. That's why they call it, or today is a gift. That's why they call it the present. Something like that. But
That's a great quote. I've heard you
yeah,
mention that. I wish you can send me that
yeah, I will.
quotation.
I'll send that to you. Yeah, today or yesterday is history. Tomorrow's a mystery, but today is a gift. That's why they call it the present. That's how.
Yeah.
Um, I just took a couple of notes down because I mean, you hit on some really profound points. So I wrote a couple of things down that popped into my mind. And we talked about, a midlife crisis in itself is like, in a way, it's a signal. It's a signal for change needed. It's, it's could be in response to something, you know, traumatizing or tragic or something very unfortunate, but it can also set in out of nowhere. Life can be perfect on paper, but despite anyone's given circumstances, I think a midlife crisis is something virtually everyone goes through. And there's a great need to speak about this openly and honestly, and for people to explore this, because like so many things, it's you know it's something almost taboo. Like you're not supposed to. We all have problems, but we pretend like, oh, I never have problems, or I'm never sad. You're supposed to go out there and fake it. I'm not with that. I mean, don't go take your negative stuff out on other people, but it's okay to be real and live in that. Live live through it. When we try to suppress these things, they continue to haunt us. But I think something that you talked about, with Gary, as far as practicing that mindfulness and that gratitude and growing that energy, cultivating that, is something that can help. And also finding a sense of purpose. It could be like the guy you referenced with math, just wanting to learn more about math. It could be coaching. It could be some form of service to the world, service to others. I think brings us back from those depths, from those dark places where we feel like, what does anything even matter? Because I've been there. I've been extremely depressed. I've been, thinking like, what is the point in any of this? Why am I even here? And that's us getting, as Alan Watts would say, so caught up in the game that we forget that we are God. I'm going to unmute you. I think you got muted there. There we go.
Oh yeah.
You get so caught up in the game that you forget it's a game. This is not the extent of all reality. And this is what all the ancient teachings explain to us. And I think part of the unpleasantness and the tragedy of death is our uncertainty surrounding it. We feel so uncertain and so afraid of dying. Um, and I'm not saying it's a good thing. I'm just saying it's an inevitability. And I think with understanding comes the enlightenment to see things in the right perspective. And again, I'm not an expert on this, but I'm seeking answers on this myself, because it's the biggest part of life. I
Mm.
mean, it's the duality of life. And I would love to explore this topic some more and learn more about it myself. I've got one book that I still getting into, but the Tibetan Book of the Dead,
Mm-hmm.
and that kind of outlines um, this Tibetan philosophy on life and death, and I guess the Buddhist perspective on all these things. So it's highly regarded as a very enlightening book. Again, I'm not all the way through it, just getting started on it, but that's one that I've come across in research. But I'll reference Alan Watts again. You know, because you you said part of this. I heard part of this when you were speaking, and it's he puts it like this. It's something like, to the to the to the regular person, the mountains are just mountains, but to the student, to the student, if you will, the mountains are no longer mountains. To the master, the mountains are once again mountains. So the mountains are once more mountains. So when you know nothing, it's just mountains. When you're a student of the universe, and you're in your practice, the mountains are no longer mountains. It's something more abstract, profound. Then you just come full circle once you,
Yeah.
and that's
That's interesting quote.
yeah. I see. I'm not getting the quote exactly right, but it's something along those lines, and it's just kind of like, they people joke, we start out in diapers and we finish in diapers.
I agree.
We it's the circle of life. We always come back
Yeah.
to, whether it's spiritually or mentally or even physically, we come back to this state of infancy, and that's
Mm,
just
mm,
there's some renewal that takes place in cycles. As we spiral, we may go down for a little bit, but there's peaks and valleys. And I
mm.
think in some sense we're kind of spiraling upwards towards some higher level of evolution. And
Yeah, the Hermetics said it's a returning home. And then from my Christian background, that's really a returning home. In
yeah,
order for you to be really matured and to really get high up there, you must go down
yeah,
before before going up, and then you start going up. When we are going through enlightenment, we are going through these successive stages, layers of enlightenment, and we're going up, and it's a returning home where we have come from before we came down here. So I
yeah.
agree with you on that one.
It's like it's like the formation of diamonds. You can't just throw the coal. You can't just snatch the coal up and make it into a diamond. It has to compress. It has to form under pressure over time. Um, but that's that's it. And I came across a video the other day. It's a short clip from Jocko podcast, Jocko Willink, and
Mhm.
they were talking about something. They were talking about a particular book. I don't have it in front of me, but I'll send it to you. But in this book, it's
Okay.
basically the account of from a soldier in World War II, and some of the things that he describes. And this is one where he passed away. He was killed in combat, but they found his writings and made a book out of it. And now, you know, it's been published quite some time ago. But it's the stuff in that book. And again, I haven't read it. I just came across this, but the clips that they shared within that were putting things into perspective. That's what the video was about. Sometimes through our own suffering, we get stuck in this negative feedback loop where we're just essentially reliving it in our minds all the time. And your mind doesn't know the difference between thinking something, and actually experiencing it. It's all the same to your mind. If you think about something terrible, you will have a visceral response within your body. It's just how we work. And that's the power of vision. That's the power of focus. And, some of the things we talked about, mindfulness. But in this, they were talking about at the end, they're just like, remind me to never complain again about anything. And I was cracking up watching it. I'm like, it is so true. And they shared
Yeah.
some of their stories, like how he was complaining about the cable guy being 15 minutes late, or being frustrated about it in his own mind. When you read something like that, when you shift your perspective out of your life, out of your echo chamber, and you look around and you just see how much worse it could be. The fact that we have a home and a bed and all these comforts and all these resources that we take for granted, it we end up holding ourselves back. So the video, in short, was about the importance of shifting our perspective. And the easiest way to do that, I think, is to look at other people's experience or look at what things used to be or what they could be. And it kind of gives you the power to control your life right now. You know, another, and this is my last reference here, but Joe Dispenza, he's he's into neuroscience, psychology, positive psychology, and all this stuff. He's a pretty big name now, but I was following him really before he was even well known. And some of the things he talks about in terms of depression, programming new behavior, and really tapping into the mind is some powerful stuff. So he's got some great videos out there, but it just goes back to shifting perspective. And I think you said it best. Sometimes you have to shake it before you can change it, right? So that's what shakes your mind out of this rut. You know, you kind of wake up, you open your eyes, you see, wait a minute, I've just been staring at the ground. You know, that's been my perspective, and your experience flows through your perspective. We can all watch the same thing, but we all share different perspectives. So your experience is going to differ from mine, but sometimes shaking ourselves in that way, shifting that perspective, allows us to look up again, see that the sun is shining, see that the sky is blue, and, you know, nature is still here for us. Opportunity is still upon us, and we can really take a position to do something better, not just for ourselves, but for others. So I'm a huge proponent of just shifting perspective. And that's helped me out of some of the worst times when I was just wondering, why am I even waking up today? Why am I even why am I struggling on? Why am I suffering through this? And that for me has been the most powerful tool. So
seems like we all have to ask ourselves the why first before we can have some serious change in our lives. If you never, I think it's Socrates, if not Aristotle, who spoke about an unexamined life. An unexamined life is not a life worth living. So when we ask the question, the why, that's examination right there. And obedience to the greatest teaching that I've ever found in the ancient world, even from the greatest teacher of all time, is seek, ye shall find, knock, and it shall be open, or knock, and the door to the temple of knowledge shall get open to you. You know, that's natural law. When we seek, we find. When we knock, the door is open to us. When we ask, we receive. That's natural law. It doesn't matter who you are, where you are. When you ask the wise, there's no way you're not going to get responses from the world we live in.
that's absolutely right, man. I I love what you're doing. I love the philosophical nature, the quotes you're able to just bring up, and you have your own thoughts and reflections that you can weave into this, and I see that in our conversation today. Um, but I want to give an opportunity, you know, for if you have anything else to add before we sign off here. Anything else you want to say before we go to the listeners?
Well, this has been a great experience, Eric. I have enjoyed being in a platform. Uh, I think this is my second time I've been interviewed before. And
Okay.
this has been really exciting. Sometimes you are afraid to venture, for some reason, and some of the fears that we have are just made up in the
Yeah.
mind. And then these fears, at the end of the day, once we have taken the steps and we have done it anyways, you discover that this was all made up in your mind. It's just all conditioning. Who is this American civil rights movement leader? I think it's Martin Luther King. He says, take the first step in faith. You don't have to see the whole staircase, just take the first step. So it has helped to take that first step and, say, Eric, would you want to have me in your platform, in your show? It was all fear. I was afraid of, like, oh, maybe you will say no. And then some other people that have asked, and it's just been an exciting, venture. And Stephen Erkovi says, feel the fear and do it anyways. You don't have to have fear make decisions for you. You make them. So fear has been a great part of my life. But when I remember these great thinkers, it makes me act. So that's one thing that I would like to conclude with and say thank you for having me in the platform and just to be in this energy that we are in where we can exchange. Anybody listening, I'm sure we have left some few nuggets there, some few things that we're thinking about and that may be of value to the listener out there. We come from different worlds. You're from the West, I'm out there in Africa, although now I'm currently here in the US. But intelligence, wisdom, knowledge is all evenly spread 100% all over the universe. Wherever you stand, you can still learn and synthesize things, as we have said. And I'm excited and I'm happy that I was able to come and be in a platform and hope I've said sound things. Sometimes you worry about that a lot of people are listening, and that worry itself becomes the problem because you tend to shrink and and not be yourself. Whereas, you've got to be who you are and not try to be a second-class citizen or something else. Yeah. So I'm happy to have come and be part of this great movement with your podcast, and we have recorded so many. And I'm sure and I'm certain that you are going far with this and blessing other people's lives. Thank you so much, Eric.
Well, thank you. It's been a pleasure having you on. I really appreciate you taking the time to sit down and have this conversation. And I think it will change people. I know it will change people's lives. Even if it's just one person, that's enough for me. I mean, you've dropped some really incredible philosophical quotes and thoughts and things like that people can definitely take and run with that. And these are the things right here that inspired me on my journey to help pull me out of where I was and really get to a better place. So I look forward to hearing a little more of your own personal reflections, your own writings. I know you're gonna end up writing a book or doing an audio book or something one of these days. And man, I'd like to do the same. So I resonate with that about you because in that sense, we have a lot in common. We think a lot in the same way in terms of the philosophical things. And, I've got, I pulled it out the other day, but I've got a stack of notes here. I guess I'll pull it out again.
Yeah, I
This
want to
is a,
see that.
this is a fireproof
Oh,
bag right here.
oh boy, that's so crazy.
I've got all my notes over basically the last 10 years or so since I've been in here.
Wow, that's
And it's,
motivating.
but it's stuff that this is what it took. This is what it took to get me out of where I was and into a position where I felt, well, where I was getting any kind of mental clarity and making any progress within myself. So these are just thoughts and sorting my own head out. And we look at some of the greatest writings of all time, and they weren't books. A lot of these weren't books. They were personal journals. They were, personal writings that people just use to navigate their own life. And we come across some of this, and it's gold. You know, it's gold. And I'm not speaking about my own stuff. I'm speaking historically. You know, that's where the most value comes from, and someone writing to themselves to help navigate their own life. So again, I see that in you. I forget which culture. It's probably multiple cultures. I know it's in ancient African culture, but it's also in ancient Chinese culture, Indian. Um, you know, they have a practice of recognizing the God within one another, that we're
I
all
agree.
God and
Yeah.
God is us. And I
Hmm.
think that's where the powerful stuff takes place, is recognizing the God within you and vice versa. And
Yeah,
we
me
help each
recognizing the
other.
God in you.
And we help each other grow and actualize through whatever this process is, into something greater. And that carries and echoes through society and all of time. So that's it, ladies and gentlemen. Hopefully you found value in this. You know the mantra: you have the power, you are the solution. Resist, defy, object. Take care of your world.